question now for Justice Chandrachud, and this is again referring back to your decision in the Sabarimala case. Just a little bit of a context there for the global audience is the Indian Supreme Court judgment that held that the practice of preventing the entry of women in a specific temple in Kerala, which is in the southern part of India, as unconstitutional. There was a vitriolic reaction against the verdict. Could you comment on striking the right balance between societal beliefs and religious customs to reflect notions of gender equality?
You know, one of the unwritten rules of the game of being a judge is that you don't talk about your own judgments. But now you're inviting me to make a breach of that norm. But just taking off from what Dr. Tuk said and Professor Laurent said, about having more women in important positions of empowerment and authority. My icon, which is incidentally Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Ginsburg was asked how many women in the Supreme Court would be sufficient according to you. She said, well, why do you ask me this question? 9, she said. I'd be satisfied when all 9 are women in the Supreme Court. And I think that's my take as well on the empowerment of women. Coming back to your question, just for the international audience, and I'm not going to really defend my judgment because it's obviously been the two viewpoints on a critical issue like this, which was that the custom in a temple said that women between the ages of 10 and 50 would not be allowed to enter the temple because that was stated to be the menstruating age, 10 and 50. They have a ballpark figure. And we said, and the reason for that was that the deity is considered to be celibate, and therefore the presence of a woman would affect the celibate nature of the deity. That's the belief, that's the custom, which of course we respect as human beings, as judges, but that has nothing to do with the constitutional question. Now, we struck down that and we said even a custom is subject to constitutional values and constitutional rights. And that therefore there is nothing in the religious sphere which is really private, because religion essentially has a position in the public space of the nation. So therefore we said that even a religious custom is amenable to constitutional control. And India has a long history of temple entry movements, because not merely women, as in this case, but the Dalits, the untouchables, were excluded from temples. And a part of the constitutional movement for freedom was not just the movement for political freedom in India. You can't understand the constitution by construing it merely as a document for the transfer of political power from a colonial regime to a homegrown regime. But it was also a movement for transformation, for a transformation of society. And therefore, our constitution really reflects this very deep-seated aspiration for transformation in Indian society. So we in religion, we follow in the Supreme Court what is called the essential religious practices test, which is that the Supreme Court will decide, or the court will decide what is essential to the religion. And I criticize that test, and I have suggested that you must have a different test, which is the anti-exclusion principle, which means really this, that even if a practice is essential to religion, if it perpetrates the exclusion of a certain class of society, then that exclusion is amenable to constitutional standards. So we have an article which bans untouchability in the Indian Constitution. And I said to exclude a woman who is in the menstruating age group from praying in a temple really makes her into the position of an untouchable, involving basic issues of purity and pollution, and therefore it infringes constitutional safeguards. Now, interestingly, there was a dissent in that, a very beautifully written dissent, and in fact, my colleague, Justice Indu Malhotra, she and I are now sharing the bench at the present point of time. But an identitarian analysis of the dissent would be too reductive. There's a perception that, because you're a woman judge in the Supreme Court, you must necessarily take a particular viewpoint. And I think that's wrong. And that's exactly what Professor Laurent said. And that's not just a question of having women, but having a question of diversity. And that's more important than anything else. So we both agreed on this, that the court has the jurisdiction to scrutinize essential religious practices. But she said that, well, the court would ban only oppressive or pernicious practices and not every religious practice. But that was where we really parted company, so to speak. And where we said that the majority said that we can, there is constitutional control which can be exercised over fundamental aspects of religion, insofar as religion has an interface with the constitution. So that really is the distinction between the majority and the minority view. But our aspiration for gender justice is not just confined to the religious sphere. As you know, recently I delivered a judgment in the month of the end of February and March, opening up the armed forces for women. So as a result of our judgment, which has been accepted, of course, by the government wholeheartedly, we have opened up the army for service on a permanent basis for women, and the Navy, and of course the Air Force is already, we have fighter pilots now who are women. But the Supreme Court of India has opened up the space for women to join the army as well as the Navy on a permanent basis. Interestingly, the government told us in the Navy case, we can't have women because our Russian warships don't have toilet facilities for women. And we said, sorry, this is not constitutionally acceptable. And that can never be an answer to deny a woman the right to have permanency in the armed forces. And I think it's a matter of tremendous satisfaction for me as a judge to see women increasingly assuming positions of importance. They're coming out of the law schools. They're joining the district judiciary in India in very large numbers. The higher judiciary, yes, I would aspire to what what RBG said, that you need to have more women in positions of power and empowerment and authority.